Today's worship theme is Imagine Beloved Community. What is beloved community? Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. lifted up this idea. He envisioned it as a society based on justice, equal opportunity, and love of one's fellow human beings. Today's story by Karen G. Johnston is not about Dr. King, but about his friend John Lewis. John Lewis was a great leader in this nation who died just this past July. He was active in the civil rights movement with Dr. King, and he served for 33 years in the United States Congress. He was later called the conscience of the Congress, and we were very sad to lose him this summer, and thankful for all he did to bring about justice and beloved community in our nation. John Lewis grew up in a large family, and he would spend time with his relatives and friends. There were many children in the neighborhood, and they would play together. In his autobiography, Mr. Lewis talks about a time when he was playing outside at his Aunt Seneva's house with about 14 other children. And then a big storm arrived, the kind of storm that made him very afraid. In his autobiography, Lewis writes these words: Aunt Seneva was the only adult around, and as the sky blackened and the wind grew stronger, she herded us inside. Her house was not the biggest place around, and it seemed even smaller with so many children squeezed inside. We were small and surprisingly quiet. All of the shouting and laughter that had been going on earlier outside had stopped. The wind was howling now, and now the house was starting to shake. We were scared. Even Aunt Seneva was scared. And then it got worse. The house was beginning to sway. The wood plank flooring beneath us began to bend, and then a corner of the room started up, lifting. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. None of us could. This storm was actually pulling the house towards the sky, with us inside it. That's when Aunt Seneva told us to clasp hands. Line up and hold hands, she said, and we did as we were told. Then she had us walk as a group towards the corner of the room that was rising. From the kitchen to the front of the house we walked, wind screaming outside, sheets of rain beating on the tin roof. Then we walked back in the other direction as another end of the house began to lift. And so it went, back and forth, 15 children walking with the wind, holding that trembling house down with the weight of our small bodies. Can you imagine what it was like to be inside that house, afraid that it might fall apart from the destructive force of the wind and rain from the whole storm? I'm so glad that John Lewis wasn't alone and that he was there with his friends and family. I'm so glad they figured out a way to work together. When John Lewis was much older and he was writing down the story of his life, he wrote these words: More than a half-century has passed since that day, and it has struck me more than once over those many years that our society is not unlike the children in that house, rocked again and again by the winds of one storm or another, the walls around us seeming at times as if they may fly apart. It seemed that way in the 1960s at the height of the civil rights movement, when America itself felt as if it might burst at the seams. So much tension, so many storms. But the people of conscience never left the house. They never ran away. They stayed. They came together and they did the best they could, clasping hands and moving toward the corner of the house that was the weakest. And then another corner would lift and we would go there. And eventually, inevitably, the storm would settle and the house would stand still. But we knew another storm would come, and we would have to do it over again and again. And we did. And we still do. All of us, you and I. Children holding hands, walking with the wind.